This is Combat Mania on the Undetermined Podcast Network.
You're listening to Combat Mania, Cheap Seat Sports Production, part of the Undetermined Podcast Network. It's episode number 6. Hello, everybody. Once again, I am Tom Albano, your host, as always, here on Combat Mania. I want to apologize for last week for there not being an episode. I got busy with things. But here I am, and it's time to talk about the wild world of combat sports. And we're going to kick things off with professional wrestling because, wow, what a week. What a week leading up to the WWE TLC pay-per-view event, and what a week it was afterwards. Particularly the weekend leading up to TLC was insane. And there was something non-WWE related, but still professional wrestling related, that it was like, wow, another blow to another certain organization. So, let's just get right into it. I'm going to kick things off with this episode of Combat Mania with the world of professional wrestling. So, WWE TLC. Tables, ladders, and chairs. Oh my. It took place this past Sunday night, October 22nd, from the Target Center in Minneapolis. And, well, let's just say it was quite the event. It was a good event. It was great. But it was not the event we anticipated. It was not the event drawn on paper. The Shield reunion, well, that lasted long. Although technically it was in a spirit at the event. And the supposed Demon versus Sister Abigail match, I was going to joke, wow, it's the first intergender match in WWE in how long? But that also did not happen. And for those of you who either missed the event or sleeping under a rock for the last week, or you're just listening to me to get all the combat sports world news and we're confused about what happened, I did actually post a little Periscope video about this last week on both this account and the Unspoken Podcast account. But it appears that something is going around the locker room. Something's going around the Raw locker room that's not very fun. And it appears that it's a case of the mumps. I remember originally it was like viral meningitis, unless that's the same thing. I'm not a big science and, sickness guy, so I don't know if there's a difference between viral meningitis and the mumps. I know mumps is a viral disease, but I don't know how related it is to meningitis. I actually have a friend from college who is actually battling the mumps right now, and not a fun battle. But it appears that's going around the Raw locker room, and it was first reported like on early Friday morning. I forget which site it was I read it on. I remember reading it on No DQ, but I don't know which site it was that first reported it. Because I know No DQ didn't break the story. I think it was Meltzer? Did Meltzer maybe break the story? I forget who, but the story goes that apparently something's going around the Raw locker room. They think it's, I've heard mumps, I've heard viral meningitis, but it's going around, and supposedly it had impacted Bo Dallas, which is why Bo Dallas hasn't been around on TV for the last couple of weeks, despite The Miz, his entourage, and The Bar being in this big rivalry with The Shield. But on Friday morning, it was rumored that it had also impacted Bray Wyatt, who is the real-life brother of Bo Dallas, and Roman Reigns. They're like, okay, that's interesting, but you don't expect it to have a real big, impact. It's like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know what they're going to do for the event. Maybe they'll make a rebound or something. And then came the press release, which is what I was talking about in the Periscope video. And that press release came from WWE basically confirming that there was something going around the Raw locker room, and because of it, Roman Reigns and Bray Wyatt had been pulled from their respective matches at TLC. Originally, Roman was going to team with Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins for the first time since 2014 to battle The Miz, The Bar, aka Sheamus and Cesaro, Braun Strowman, and Kane. Yeah, I don't know why Kane suddenly got involved in this. I have to give credit though, that was at least was a surprise. At the very least, it was a surprise, and just because of the dirt sheets and the modern age of social media and everything, there's few surprises in professional wrestling. So something like that, it's random, but at least I can understand and see where WWE is coming from and wanting to bring a surprise. I actually did think it was going to be Curtis Axel as a fifth member originally on Monday, because they were teasing, if Braun Strowman wins the cage match with Roman Reigns, then Team Miz can have a fifth member. And I thought it was going to be Curtis Axel because, after all, Axel is from Minnesota. He was actually with The Bar earlier that day at the Minnesota Vikings game, which the Vikings won, so skull. But yeah, Roman was supposed to compete with the Shield. It was supposed to be the big Shield reunion. That was going to be the theme of this pay-per-view, basically. It was the Shield reunion. But that didn't happen. And Bray Wyatt was supposed, as I said before, was supposed to don some weird drag or something like that and fight Finn Balor, who was going to be in the Demon moniker. It was going to be like the Demon versus Sister Abigail. And just going into that match thinking, oh God, hopefully it's nothing, Santina Morella-like, or the infamous, oh God, what was it? I've put it out of my head, and it's like, for good reason. What's it called? The Hardcore Evening Gown match at, the Hardcore Evening Gown match at King of the Ring 2000. So, there's that too. But instead, we ended up getting Kurt Angle competing for the first time in 11 years in a WWE ring. And the last time he actually had a match, in WWE or not in WWE, I feel like it must have been like early 2016. So Kurt had been in retirement for about a year or two now. And he was coming out for this one match. And instead of Finn Balor versus Bray Wyatt, we got Finn Balor versus AJ Styles. AJ Styles coming over from SmackDown for one night. And I have to give credit to WWE because it was a good response to, hey, yeah, there is something going on. We apologize to the fans, and to make up for it, we're going to deliver this, and we're going to deliver this. And it's like, unexpected, yes, but it's in, they were looking out for the fans' interests. They're like, these were the two big matches on the show. Both of them got, ruined. We're not going to cheap it out by doing like a 5-on-2 or canceling one of the matches. We're just going to, we're going to switch things up a bit. And switch things up a bit, indeed they did. So let's just get into basically what happened on the card. So first of all, we had the pre-show match, which was Sasha Banks and Alicia Fox. This match, again, it's one of those things where it's like, it seems to be a common thing whenever a pre-show match happens. I'm like, it's a pre-show match. And basically, there's no other way I can put it. But yeah, it was a pre-show match. It was like, nothing too special. It was rematch city because these two already had a match or two on previous editions of Raw. And I don't know, man. It was just... I haven't heard... I know Alicia Fox was on one of the podcasts. I forget if it was Stone Cold's podcast or Jericho's. I swear it might have been Stone Cold's. Or maybe it was Sam Roberts. I don't know. But basically, she was on one of the podcasts, and a lot of fans ended up feeling bad for her. I haven't heard her backstory or whatever it was that fans were actually like, oh, I feel bad. Or maybe it was the fact that, she hasn't received too much of a push despite being there for like 10 years or something like that. And it's like, it's weird because as much as, I would understand that and I feel for that, Alicia Fox's character is one where it's like, I have to mute my TV. Whenever she's going into one of those screams or whatnot, it's like I have to mute the TV because it's like, I don't want to say cringe, but cringe is the word that comes to my mind. It's cringe. And I feel bad for Sasha Banks. Sasha, again, like I do feel bad for Alicia Fox, but it's like, she is sort of the past. Meanwhile, Sasha Banks is more of the present and want more matches. Sasha deserves a little better. Maybe they could do something interesting with Alicia. Because, spoiler alert, Sasha does win this match, but the next night on Raw, she ended up facing... The two ended up facing again, but Bayley was added to the mix, and the winner would be the captain of the Raw Women's Survivor Series team, and Alicia won. So, I don't know what they're planning to do with that. I felt it would be a little more appropriate if Sasha or Bayley won, especially considering Becky won the SmackDown Women's Captains match. So, Sasha versus Team Becky, or Team Bayley versus Team Becky, the four horsewomen. The Charlotte's definitely going to be on the team for Team SmackDown. I assume Bayley and Sasha will be for Team Raw. They've got to do something special with that. It's got to be, four horsewomen colliding in the ring. That smells like something good, especially considering there's two on each brand. But yeah, Sasha ended up winning the match, and then we go straight into the pay-per-view. Now, I did mention Sasha deserves better, and as I said on Twitter when news first broke, I think earlier this month, this isn't something I like reporting on, because at that time it was dirt sheet stuff, but it seems to, be more known now and more mainstream of sorts. But it is reported that... Well, I was actually just going into something like it was two completely different superstars, but on the same path. It was first reported earlier in the month that Neville, the former Cruiserweight champion, king of the Cruiserweights, has reportedly walked out of Raw and is negotiating for his release from WWE. And at the same time, not long after, it was reported that Nia Jax hasn't walked out of sorts, but basically is on sabbatical and is, something like she's overwhelmed or she's not happy of sorts. Something's going on. And basically Nia will be back, but we don't know when. Nia was supposed to be Sasha's opponent for this pre-show match, and it's like, on one hand I would have been, another Sasha-Nia match, but it's like, on the other hand, it's like, this match between Sasha and Alicia came out of nowhere, but I guess we can attribute that to Nia essentially walking out or taking a break, whatever it is. So there's that too. Alright, so let's just get into the events. So the opening match of this show was the debut of the former NXT Women's Champion, Asuka. Asuka finally on the main roster, debuting at TLC, taking on Emma. Fun fact, this was Emma's first singles match ever on pay-per-view. She's been there for about, three and a half years or so, something like that. And she never had a singles match on pay-per-view. It was always, a team match or a multi-woman match. There was never one-on-one. It was the first time Emma had a one-on-one match. And unfortunately for Emma, it was against the debuting Asuka. And I remember these two having a feud in NXT. I think when Asuka first arrived on the main roster, I think it was Emma and Dana Brooke feuding with Asuka. And Asuka never did, I think, have a match at one of the takeovers or NXT special or something like that. And Asuka ended up defeating Emma. And it was a similar case here. This was pretty much was a match you would expect with like an anticipated debut. Basically, I don't want to say Emma was toyed around with, but it was basically a lot of showing off of what Asuka could do in the ring. It was showing off her presence, the presence that gives goosebumps to the crowd when Asuka first makes her way to the ring with, the mask on the Titantron and everything, and the music, and the spectacle of the entrance, and then the spectacle of Asuka in the ring between, Asuka showing off her power, Asuka showing off technical skill, Asuka showing off her submission skill. Basically, it was a showing off of what Asuka could do. It was, okay, Asuka, here's your stage, here's your audience, show them what you got. And show them she did. It was definitely, wasn't the best match, but it was, hey, here's Asuka. Finally, it's time for Asuka to make her main roster debut. People have been clamoring about it for, a year or so now? Here it is. And it's just great to see Asuka in a WWE ring, finally. So, after that, we had a Cruiserweight Tag Team match. We had Cedric Alexander and Rich Swann versus Brian Kendrick and Jack Gallagher. It's good to see, a cruiserweight match that's not a cruiserweight title match on a pay-per-view, because it's like, hey, here's some more credibility to 205 Live. Here's some credibility, it's like a feud that was so good that we featured it on Raw recently. And, I do like Cedric Alexander a lot. I like Rich Swann a lot. I like Brian Kendrick. So I remember him from when I was younger, teaming with Paul London, and when he had Ezekiel Jackson as a manager. And then Jack Gallagher, I felt to be one of the more entertaining figures once the Cruiserweight Classic and 205 Live first broke onto the WWE scene. So, it's something really cool. Also, speaking of Jack Gallagher finally getting a new entrance music, which I think was kind of fitting, because it's like, for the past few weeks, even as a heel, he'd been using his, I forget the name of the song, but it's like that, it's a classic tune. I forget the name of it. But basically, I think it could have maybe worked as a heel too, because, the gentleman, the snob with the blue blood and his nose held up to the sky. Think, William Regal. Think old school Triple H when he was Hunter Hearst Helmsley. The, blue blood gimmick from Greenwich, Connecticut. Oh, it's, the theme I was talking about with Jack Gallagher was like Les Toreadors or something like that. I think that's how it's pronounced. Toreador. But it's good to see that Jack Gallagher now has a new theme, because, like I said, even though I think his old music could have worked for this heel run as well, I think it's kind of more appropriate now, because, we associate that old, cheery music for Jack Gallagher with the face run, and now that he's a bad guy, it gives a new persona of sorts. I guess that's the best way I can describe it for Jack Gallagher. But still, fine match. Nice, decent cruiserweight match. Good to see, as I said, good to see some cruiserweight action that's not a cruiserweight title match on a pay-per-view. And in the end, Cedric Alexander and Rich Swann do come away with the victory, so good on them. But it seems like this feud is going to continue based on the events of the following night's Raw and 205 Live the night after that. Because of Gentleman Jack Gallagher and Brian Kendrick confronted Alexander and Swann. They said Alexander is being held back by Swann, and they're giving him a week to make a decision. Like, you're either with us or against us. And I really, really hope they don't turn Cedric or Rich Swann heel, because, it's just, no, it's not going to work. I don't... Maybe it is going to work, but, I don't want to see that. Cedric's one of the best cruiserweights on that show. I'm saddened that he hasn't had a cruiserweight title reign yet, especially after his performance at the CWC last year, when he had the crowd on their feet and chanting, "Please sign Cedric. Please sign Cedric." So I'm really, really hoping. And Rich Swann, why would you want to turn that dancing... in a good way, I'm going to say dancing fool into a heel. I think that would be a big backfire. So then we have the Raw Women's Championship match. It's Alexa Bliss versus Mickie James. And, fine. It was a fine match. There's no problems with this match. I guess the only thing that would I maybe complain about would be the finish, which was I think it was Mickie being thrown into one of the turnbuckles and then a pinfall, or was it into the turnbuckle and then a DDT? But either way, the turnbuckle spot, it's like I feel like we've seen that before. We've seen, especially with the women's division and maybe Alexa Bliss. I feel like we have seen that before in the past, and it's like, does that have to be the finish? There's nothing wrong with Bliss's DDT, and I love Alexa Bliss as a wrestler, but it's like, I guess, the repetitiveness of the finish involving the turnbuckle spot and everything, it's like the same problem I had with what's it called? The finishes of the matches involving Shinsuke Nakamura and Jinder Mahal, and Randy Orton and Jinder Mahal. That was the match at Money in the Bank between Orton and Mahal. It was similar in fashion to the finish at Backlash when Mahal won the WWE title, and then the SummerSlam match with Nakamura. It again echoed the finishes of the likes of Backlash and Money in the Bank with Orton. It's like, you hopefully you're all understanding what I'm saying, but it's the repetitiveness, it's the monotone. It's like, okay, we've seen this before, come on, do something different. It's not like a house show where they're practicing a spot for the pay-per-view, or they're, repeating something that has previously happened. It's not a house show. This is a pay-per-view event. And I know, Monday Night Raw is now, it might exceed the value of pay-per-views for most pay-per-views, because ratings or, TV and the sponsors, that's all the big money now. But because, every night on Raw, it seems rematch city, bitch. I feel like I'm saying that at least once every Raw now. But basically, I don't want the pay-per-view being devalued, and regardless of if it's a pay-per-view or Raw or SmackDown, repeating a similar finish, it's like, come on, come up with something different. So, fine match nonetheless between Mickie and Bliss. I still love Mickie, even, 11 years after she's debuted. Still a fine competitor. I just didn't like the finish. I just wish the finish was a little different. There it was. Bliss threw James into, I think it was a turnbuckle, and then did the snap DDT. And Mickie promised, in an interview after the match, promised she would be a champion again. And considering she would be tied with Trish for most women's title reigns in WWE history, I see it happening. She'll get the title again. I don't know when. Maybe she'll get it, like, during the Christmas, New Year's kind of shows with WWE. Or maybe Mickie will get a Royal Rumble. Maybe they'll wait till Mania to put it on Mickie, but Mickie's gonna get the title back soon. She's gonna tie that record. It's gonna happen. Then we had Kalisto versus Enzo Amore for the WWE Cruiserweight Championship. And I mean, the path we've gotten to this match has been very, very weird. As I've mentioned in past episodes, I wasn't a fan originally of what they were doing with Enzo. How he did move to 205 Live, and I thought, okay, you know what, that's fine. That could potentially freshen up Enzo and his character. But I wasn't liking how they were doing the fight smarter instead of train harder thing, and yet pushing him still as a babyface. Like when he won that contenders match for the right to fight Neville at No Mercy, I was not thrilled with that. I remember ranting on Twitter like, you know, why? It makes no sense, no logic there. I just was not thrilled with that. But I do like what they're doing with it now. How I like how it's played out. How it ended up being, you know, a slow double turn of sorts between Enzo and Neville. How Enzo turned the entire Cruiserweight division against him. How Enzo basically was in the main event of Raw 3 weeks with the Cruiserweight title, the third week of which Enzo ended up dropping the title to Kalisto on Raw. And yes, we've heard about, you know, what they say about Raw now, how the main event spot maybe not as valued as much because, you know, people turn away during the third hour. The difference in viewership between the first hour Raw and the third hour Raw is quite noticeable. But I still think that there should be, you know, a place of heart, you know, for the for the main event spot. Because, you know, it's the main event. It is the main event, and you can say that, like, oh, it means nothing, but then Roman and Braun can have a steel cage match, which they hype all night, in the main event, with the big swerve finish of Kane getting involved. So you get what I mean? So it's like, it means, like, to say, you know, oh, the main event doesn't matter anymore. I smell a little BS there. But I do like how the Cruiserweights main evented Raw 3 weeks in a row, basically. It gave, again, as I mentioned before, more credibility to 205 Live, more of a reason for viewers to watch the show. But Kalisto defended the title against Enzo, and this was the plan all along before the Neville walkout, from what I understand. But in the end, Amore ended up poking the eye at Kalisto, and then executed, what the hell, it was a Jordanzo, I think it's pronounced. It's the inverted stomp face. Oh, the Lost in the Woods, that's what it is. Or the Eat the Feet. It's a new finisher for Enzo. The Lost in the Woods, the Eat the Feet. That's what Enzo's starting to use, and Enzo won back the Cruiserweight Championship. And now I would say it's kind of weird that Enzo actually is gaining more of the Cruiserweights back on his side, like Arya Daivari, Drew Gulak, and Tony Nese, Noam Dar. And now it seems like they're going to be pushing for a Cruiserweight style match at Survivor Series, you know, the traditional 5-on-5 Survivor Series elimination match. but now it's going to be like a team of face cruiserweights and a team of heel cruiserweights. And it's like, what did they say the next night on Raw? It was like the Zoe Train and Team Lucha Lucha. And you can laugh and say it's stupid, but or it makes no sense because Enzo had just turned his back on the whole cruiserweight division. The whole cruiserweight division was against him. You can argue that, but I kind of like where they were going with this, especially if like Cedric and Swan are on one team, and what's their faces? Actually, no, Kendrick and Gallagher are on the other team. I don't know. Well, they haven't announced the full match for Survivor Series, I think. Basically, what I'm going with is like it basically is like an old school WWE Survivor Series where it's like 5 competitors on one side, five faces, 5 heels on the other, and their feuds are like intermixing. And basically, the feuds intermix, and they all have like a little funny or punny or crazy team name, as I mentioned before, Team Zoe Train and Team Lucha Lucha. So it's old school Survivor Series kind of stuff, so we'll see where it goes with that. And then comes the AJ Styles Finn Balor match. And it was one of those things where it's like the fans are chanting, "This was awesome. This is awesome." And they hadn't done a thing. And it's like, I like when heel competitors, use that as kind of fuel for like, why the hell aren't you cheering for me? That these two can have a stare down and be like, and you'll still chant, "This is awesome." I think Miz has said something like that in the past before, and I know Alexa Bliss ended up saying that next night on Raw. But it was definitely a fun, so much fun match. It's like, they had the power to, okay, go out there and do your thing. And it was a great match. It's one of those cases where I didn't say anything on Twitter because I'm like, I'm basically like, you know what, it's time to shut up and let's watch some wrestling. And wrestle they did. Whew. They just went at it. It was fun. It was competitive. And Finn ended up winning with the coup de grace. They ended up shaking hands and doing the too sweet in the ring, celebrating with one another. It was great. I have no words. The only thing I'm going to say is go watch this match. Go watch it. And especially if you want to be a professional wrestler, you want to be a WWE superstar, go watch it. Because I found something unique that William Regal, WWE legend and professional wrestling legend, and one of the trainers at NXT, the general manager of NXT, said on Twitter. He said, "I hope everyone who wants to, be in the WWE one day to pay attention to that match we just saw. It was Finn Balor versus AJ Styles, because basically it was what Regal was referring to on Twitter is like, now this match, it was a cold match, even though we know the history of the Bullet Club with Finn Balor and AJ Styles, and they actually made mention of that kind of history, but there was no promo package because this wasn't the match that had to build to. It wasn't Finn Balor, the Demon, against Sister Abigail. But basically what Regal was trying to say was, you don't need all that kind of big story for a match. The story should be, even if you're going out there and it's like, oh, there's no backstory to this match. The story then should be, I'm trying to win the match. That's your story. That's your objective as a character. That's your objective as a wrestler. I'm trying to win the match. Because you win the match, you're seen, more highly in the fans and backstage. the more likely titles and other big opportunities could come. Like, it's the logic. It's the logic of professional wrestling. It's like, you're going out there to win. That's what it should be. Isn't that what combat sports is? I'm going out there to win the match. I'm going out there to beat my opponent. I'm going out there to knock him out, to tap him out, to pin him. I'm going out there for a win. That's what it should be. So I praise him. So it's like I had to give it a like and retweet because it's like William Regal reminding us that you don't need a full-blown storyline for a match. You have some sort of story, but, you know, the one... Like, I like when matches have, you know, stories attached to them, but it doesn't have to be a full-blown story. It could just be, you know, the I need to win this match, or the contendership, the opportunity at a title, or the game, the one-upsmanship, you know, the game of one-upsmanship. It's like, okay, you beat me, but you know what? I can beat you. So, am I a fan of, you know, hey, we'll do this match at the pay-per-view, and we'll do the one-upsmanship game, but the rematch will take place on Raw? Not exactly. So I go back to the Sasha Banks-Alicia Fox match, and it's like, considering that, you know, at least they tried. At least they tried to do something like the game of one-upsmanship. It's like Alicia losing to Sasha once or twice before on Raw. And it's like, okay, I know I can beat you. And I'll do it at the pay-per-view. So, even though I'm not, you know, maybe the highest on the Alicia Fox sudden push, it's like, okay, you know, they tried the one-upsmanship storyline, but then the next night on Raw, it kind of interconnected with the Survivor Series pay-per-view because Alicia did get the one-upsmanship by beating Sasha and Bayley in the triple threat for the captainship of the Raw women's team. Now, was it the best thing? You know, not really. If I was booking, you know, maybe Alicia would win one of the original Raw matches with, you know, Dirty Tactics. But, you know, it fit. Like, you know, basically what I'm trying to say is you don't need a full overblown storyline of, you know, getting on the mic and cutting promos every week. You know, even if you have little to work with, the product you can come out with can be a lot. That's basically what I'm trying to say. You know, just because you go in with little doesn't mean you can come out with a lot. And then, after the AJ Styles-Finn Balor match, we had a match between Elias and Jason Jordan. Kind of random, but, you know, they actually were building it in the pay-per-view. On the pre-show, Elias interrupted a conversation between Jason Jordan and his illegitimate father, Kurt Angle. My black son! My black son. And to retaliate, Elias was trying to perform twice during the pay-per-view, and both times Jason Jordan came out and threw produce at Elias. It was like weird and stupid, but it was a stupid kind of funny. Like, you know, okay, that's clever. So he was throwing like cabbage and carrots and lettuce. It was kind of ridiculous, but you know what? It worked. And Jordan did end up getting the win on the show, but the next night the two had a rematch, and Jordan did win again, but it was by disqualification because Elias cracked Jordan over the head with a guitar. It was El Kabong. I'm so happy that I saw the El Kabong. It's like, this is the first time in a while we've had an El Kabong on Raw. And it was coincidentally on the same day that a certain other thing happened. But we'll get to that after I talk about this TLC main event that happened. Kurt Angle's first WWE match in 11 years. As I mentioned before, like, the hype for the feud, you know, it's so different because Roman Reigns is involved. And we know how WWE is a bit high on Roman Reigns. So it seemed like they just repeated the pay-per-view opening when they were talking about, you know, Kurt Angle. It was like his first time back in the ring. It was his journey and everything. I do like, though, earlier tonight, Angle got the Shield gear, was made like an honorary member, and he did the crowd walk with Rollins and Ambrose. That was funny. And my God, was this main event over freaking booked. in a good way overbooked, but it's like, oh my god. So much happened on this show. So, we had... so much happened in this match. So much happened on the show, too, but in this match in particular. The 5-on-3 TLC match. So, we had Rollins doing a frog splash off a ladder through the announce table on Strowman. We had Ambrose performing a diving elbow drop through an announce table on Kane. That was cool. Angle did the ankle lock to Kane. Then Strowman attacks Angle. Strowman does the running power slam on Angle through a table, and Kurt Angle's escorted to the back. Which I kind of saw coming, because in emergency instances like this, WWE tries to, protect its athletes. Like, they did the stretcher spot with Lesnar, trying to escort him out, and then he comes back later in the match. They did that with Lesnar at the Royal Rumble 2015, and they did that with him this past SummerSlam. And they did that with... Oh, God, I forget. Oh, Roman. They did that with Roman at the 2016 Royal Rumble. Because that was a time when all the WWE superstars were getting injured. So, Angle's escorted to the back, so now it's a 5-on-2 scenario. So, it was just an absolute beatdown all over the ring, all over the place. Miz, Cesaro, Sheamus, Strowman, and Kane were just abusing Ambrose and Rollins. They were making them essentially their bitch. Ambrose and Rollins finally fought back. And during this time, Kane accidentally strikes Braun Strowman with a chair. And then Strowman and Kane had a huge confrontation. They did a huge spot, Cesaro, or the bar, whatever you want to call them. They did the double crucifix powerbomb on Ambrose into a table. The table didn't break, and then Strowman just picks Ambrose up and just throws him, launch darts him through the table. It's like, oh, God. And then the weirdest thing happened. The Miz ended up calling for a garbage truck. And they tried to throw Ambrose and Rollins into the garbage truck. It's like, what the fuck? We didn't see this coming. And then suddenly, Kane does the chokeslam to Braun Strowman through the stage. Then he does the, the spot at TLC 2010 at the end of that show where Cena takes Wade Barrett underneath one of the pile of chairs on the set. How the set, they have all this stack of chairs. And he just pulls it, and all the chairs basically fall on a pile onto Wade Barrett. Basically, that happened here. Kane put Strowman underneath the set, one spot in particular where there was a bunch of chairs, pulled on it, and basically the chairs dogpiled onto Strowman. So basically, Strowman was buried underneath chairs. Strowman somehow ended up getting up after a double chokeslam. Ambrose and Rollins got double chokeslam through 2 tables. Strowman recovered, and then suddenly the whole team turned on Strowman, threw him into the garbage truck, and then the compactor, how you compact the trash in the truck, everything, comes together in that truck. The compactor went off, it's like, did we just witness a fucking murder on television, on WWE television? Did we just witness a fucking murder? Because there were you're a murder chants during the whole show, and Strowman was basically not there for the rest of the match. And as I said, the garbage truck drove away. Ambrose and Rollins are still being dominated, and it looks like they're going to finish him off. And then Kurt's music hits, and the pop is all over the place, and he angle slams Sheamus. He angle slams Cesaro through a table. Ambrose and Rollins put Kane through a barricade. Miz did a skull-crushing finale on Kurt. Near fall. Angle does the ankle lock to Miz. Miz escapes, but Rollins does the knee to Miz. Ambrose does dirty deeds. Angle does the angle slam. And then the triple powerbomb on Miz. And it was a win. Holy fuck, that was a match. It was an interesting kind of match. It was special in more than one way. And, as much as it was overbooked, I thought it was still enjoyable. I remember Pro Wrestling Insider's Twitter was like, oh, that was a terrible match. It was a match they couldn't fuck up, and they fucked it up. I remember all the whole IWC basically came after them. It's like, wow, you guys are fun at parties. My God, even though it was overbooked as fuck, it was still enjoyable. And still made sense. And it's going to be interesting what they do now with Braun Strowman, because I guess Braun Strowman's going to be a fucking babyface now. Because basically he's going to have survived a murder. Because that's what it was. It was a fucking murder. My God. So that was TLC. It was a fun show. Really fun show. I think if you were to force me to compare Hell in a Cell and TLC, well, Hell in a Cell had the, 2 great Hell in a Cell matches. The rest of the card, as I mentioned in the past episode, I think was meh. But TLC kind of delivered. So I think I would give it to TLC. It was a fun show. Now, before we get into the world of MMA, I do want to mention this. Apparently, Impact Wrestling is now Impact Wrestling once again. And that is because on Monday, I think it was, Impact decided to disassociate itself with Jeff Jarrett and Global Force Wrestling. The reasoning appears to be that Jeff Jarrett showed up to an independent show pretty much shit-faced drunk and not able to... I think he competed, but, not to the level that he could have. I remember listening to the promo, and I kind of can see the argument of, perhaps Jarrett was drunk. And in a statement, the independent wrestling promotion announced that Jarrett would not make a second appearance as he was scheduled to. And he, quote, went home on his own accord. And now supposedly Jeff Jarrett is in rehab. And rumor has it might be a WWE-sponsored rehab. But that's it. Jeff Jarrett and Impact Wrestling are no more. And Global Force Wrestling, as a name, is no more. Impact is now Impact once again. GFW is officially dead. So, on one hand, it's like, God, Impact Wrestling, is it not going to die yet? Like I mentioned before in a previous episode, it's like a cockroach in the nuclear war. You can't kill it. You just can't. But on the other hand, it's like, wow, that's a sad way for the GFW name to end. And God, I hope Jeff Jarrett gets the help that he needs, because my God, it's been a rough time for Jarrett. It's been a rough few years. Yeah, it just hasn't been the same, right, Jeff? So that's going to do it for professional wrestling. You're listening to Combat Mania, part of the Undetermined Podcast Network. Let's go to the world of MMA. So, we had Bellator 185 last weekend, and overall it was a alright show. It was the debut of Gegard Mousasi, and he ended up getting a unanimous decision win over Alexander Shlemenko in the main event, scoring 29-28 on all 3 judges' scorecards. A little bit of controversy there. Some felt that maybe Shlemenko deserved the nod. Personally, for me, I guess I could see it either way, but to me, this felt like the right call, 29-28. It was close, but maybe Mousasi pulled out the win just by a hair. Just by a hair. So I don't know if we can give him a title shot right away. I think there's more that needs to be done for him to get a middleweight title match in Bellator. We had Heather Hardy compete in her second MMA fight, and she got busted up bad. Like, she was bleeding from the nose and mouth pretty bad. So the debuting Christina Williams gets her first MMA win. So congratulations to her, and hopefully Heather Hardy can rebound from this. The co-main event was Naaman Gracie versus Zach Busia. Kind of a disappointment considering we were supposed to get a light heavyweight contenders bout between Liam McGeary and King Mo Muhammad Lawal. As the co-main event, it was supposed to be Lawal versus McGeary, like kind of a contenders match for the light heavyweight title. But instead we get Gracie versus Busia, and Gracie gets a submission due to neck crank and gets, I believe he's still undefeated. So congratulations to him. Before we go to UFC, a little interesting tidbit that came my way today. Apparently Bellator is finally looking to get a heavyweight title back. Bellator has been without a heavyweight champion since, I want to say, the middle of 2016. Yeah. Vitaly Minakov defeated Chet Congo in the last heavyweight championship fight in Bellator MMA. That was in 2014. Then Minakov never fought again in Bellator, and it was decided in May 2016. Yeah, it was like 2 whole years to strip Minakov of the title, because technically he was still under contract. But now, according to Bellator president Scott Coker, there are plans to get the heavyweight title back into the picture next year. Now, I mean, let's take a look at Bellator's heavyweight scene. You have Big Country Roy Nelson, who I thought was pretty good in his, very good actually, in his Bellator debut. You got Chet Congo. I think he's still fighting. You have Fedor Emelianenko, who suffered a pretty bad loss to Matt Mitrione. So you do have Matt Mitrione as well. That was back in June at Bellator NYC. So Mitrione is now 3-0 in MMA. I mean, in Bellator, 9-5. I mean, 12-5 in MMA. He was 9-5 entering Bellator, and now he's 12-5. You have one of my favorites, possibly one of the most underrated guys in Bellator, Bobby Lashley. He's a 15-2 MMA record, 5-0 Bellator record. I know Bobby Lashley is spending a lot more time in Impact, competing in professional wrestling, but Bobby Lashley is a hell of a competitor in MMA, and I think he should also be in consideration for that title. Frank Mir apparently has signed a deal or something like that, but I don't know about putting a heavyweight title on him. This isn't 2004, 2005. So, I mean, you do have Javier Ayala, too. 5-3 in Bellator, 10-6 in MMA. I mean, I guess you might be able to, like, do some sort of tournament or something. Because, I mean, Chet Congo is 9-2. As I said, Lashley's 5-0. He should be in consideration. Roy Nelson coming over from the UFC. Fedor Emelianenko, as much as he's 0-1, he is one of the legends of mixed martial arts. So, you could consider that as well. So, I mean, it's interesting who they could put the heavyweight title on. Because here's the official quote from Scott Coker. He said during, I think it was the MMA Hour, I think that we'll probably crown a new champion first quarter of next year, and then we'll start having a lot more fights in the heavyweight division. We've got some great heavyweights now. There's a lot of matchups I can't wait to see, and I'm excited about 2018. I think 2018 is going to be a very busy year, a big growth year for Bellator, and the heavyweight division will be a big part of it. I think you can kind of put the names in the mix. I think of Mitrione, who has a victory over Fedor, Roy Nelson, Chet Congo, even King Mo. But he's beating Congo, and he wants to stay at heavyweight. King Mo did lose to Mirko Krokop last year. He has, again, Scott Coker doesn't have a shortage of options. It's just interesting, about the matchups. Who could he pair together? So I'm interested in seeing that. It's time. We need a heavyweight champion in Bellator once again. I don't know what they're waiting for, but it's time. It's got to come soon. Meanwhile, last weekend, the UFC held an exclusive Fight Pass event. It was a UFC Fight Night, Cerrone versus Till. They held it at the Ergo Arena in Gdansk, Poland. in Poland. The main card had Oscar Piechota defeating Jonathan Wilson by decision. Jan Blachowicz defeating Devin Clark by submission. Former strawweight title challenger and home country girl, Karolina Kowalkiewicz defeat Jodie Esquibel by decision. And then in the main event, you had Darren Till taking on Donald Cerrone. Donald Cerrone, of course, a fan favorite MMA fighter, the Cowboy. He entered the bout, I think it was 32-9. He had lost his last two, so he was looking to turn things around. And then you had Darren Till, who entered the bout 16-1, excuse me. And in the UFC, he was 3-0-1. And, you know, I was kind of rooting for Cerrone because I do love Cerrone, but man, Darren Till impressed. Holy cow. That is why, I mean, he did so well against Cerrone. He finished him off by TKO in the first round, 4 minutes, 20 seconds into the fight. Ha, 420 joke. But Till was just so good that UFC President Dana White flat out on Twitter called him the future. And I could see it. Darren Till could very well be the future. This was the biggest win of his career. This fight might have just put Darren Till on the UFC map. And what made it better for Till and being put on the map is Darren Till actually got into an altercation after the bout. He called out Mike Perry, and Mike Perry just happened to be at cage side, and the two went verbally at it on the show. Like, they were yelling at each other cage side. And Mike Perry said he wasn't impressed with Till's performance. He said it was more Cerrone didn't show up. It wasn't the Cowboy that everyone knew and loved. So, I mean, is it disappointing that Cerrone lost? Yeah, I don't know how he's going to rebound after 3 straight losses. But I wouldn't write off Darren Till. Darren Till, I'm going to keep my eye on. Everybody should keep their eye on Darren Till, because he really, really is going to come on the scene, and he's going to leave a bang. He's going to leave his mark in the UFC. I guarantee that. He's going to do something. I mean, he kind of just did. He defeating Donald Cerrone, but, you know, hopefully for this kid, the future is even brighter. So next week, the UFC is going to have a fight night event. Not next week, this weekend. It's going to be in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And the card is going to feature Derek Brunson taking on Lyoto Machida, Demi Maia taking on Colby Covington, Pedro Munoz battling Rob Font, Jim Miller taking on Francisco Trinaldo, Thiago Santos facing Jack Hermanson, and John Lineker taking on Marlon Vera. So, going to be a nice card. And then, of course, in 2 weeks, UFC 217, Bisping versus St. Pierre, the big show from Madison Square Garden. Michael Bisping defending the middleweight title against George St. Pierre, who steps into an MMA ring for the first time in 4 years. Cody No Love Garbrandt taking on TJ Dillashaw. Former teammates, now very bitter rivals. Joanna Violence. I always struggle with her last name like everybody else. Joanna Jacek taking on Rose Namajunas for the women's strawweight title. And then, of course, you got Stephen Thompson, Wonder Boy, taking on Jorge Masvidal. That's going to be a fun fight. Johnny, I can't ever make weight, Hendricks is going to fight. He's going to take on Paulo Brachina. Interesting last name. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Hopefully I didn't butcher it. The Fox Sports 1 prelim cards are going to feature Joseph Duffy taking on James Vick, Walt Harris and Mark Godvier, Ion Kudlava taking on Mikhail Oleskishuk, another name I can't really pronounce, and Randy Brown taking on Mickey Gall. That's going to be fun. I want to see the Mickey Gall fight. I want to see if he gets another win. And on the UFC Fight Pass prelims, they also got some good prelims. Curtis Blades is going to be in action, along with Alvin St. Preux. Blades taking on Olkesi Olenek. Alvin St. Preux taking on Corey Anderson. And Ayman Zahabi taking on Ricardo Ramos in a bantamweight bout. So, a lot of good stuff in MMA coming up. It's going to be fun. And now before we end today, let's just take a quick dip into the world of boxing. So, UFC President Dana White has come out and announced that, according to him, I think there was a report in the Wall Street Journal, he's claimed that the big Mayweather-McGregor fight from this past August has broken the global pay-per-view record. The current record holder right now is the Floyd Mayweather versus Manny Pacquiao fight that took place in May 2015 and drew 5.5 million buys. According to Dana White, here's the official quote from him: "We broke the record. The thing ended up doing 6.7 million pay-per-view buys globally. How about this? We broke the record in Australia. We broke the record in the UK at 4 in the morning. We broke the record in Spain. We broke Canada and the United States." The claim about the United States that one's a little iffy because several claims have come in that Mayweather-McGregor was 4.4 million buys, which would fall just short of Mayweather-Pacquiao, which was 4.6 million. The UK one, however, there are numerous reports that say that is correct. The UK pay-per-view record, it appears it's going to surpass 1 million pay-per-view buys, which would be a record in the UK. It fell short at the gate. It fell short of Mayweather-Pacquiao at the gate. And according to Dana White, not only was it the most purchased pay-per-view event, but the most pirated event and the most gambled on event in history. We'll have to wait until official numbers come in for claims like these, but it probably wouldn't surprise me. As on a previous edition of the Unspoken Podcast, the other show I do with Nick Federa and occasionally Nick Morgeson, where we talk about sports other than combat sports, usually it's baseball, football, etc. But we did talk about Mayweather versus McGregor in the weeks leading up to the fight, and we said that it was probably going to purchase a lot, but there was going to be a lot of pirating as well. So, and we noted a lot of gambling on this with all this odds and everything. So, this definitely, wouldn't be surprising if all this is true. And an other interesting story coming our way. Apparently, Dana White also has claimed that the UFC can soon have boxing under its umbrella. He said during the interview with the Wall Street Journal, for those of you who don't know, during, I think it was the post-fight conference or the press tour, something like that, Dana White was wearing a Zuffa boxing shirt. The Fertitta brothers and Zuffa were the longtime owners of UFC until the summer of 2016, right after UFC 200, when the UFC was sold to WME IMG for a whole lot of cash. Let's just say that. But Dana said that he could see bringing boxing under the umbrella and trying to see what they could do with it. And Dana White says he's not going to be out of the UFC anytime soon just because the Fertitta brothers ended up leaving. He says he loves working with Ari Emanuel, who's the co-CEO of WME IMG, and his other partner, Patrick Whitesell. He also likes working with him. Dana White technically still owns some of UFC, and he is under contract, but he's basically saying he's not going to leave the UFC just to go promote boxing. And of course, after the pay-per-view at the post-fight press conference, Conor McGregor did say that he is leaving all options on the table, including the possibility of working both boxing and MMA, although it seems like his next fight is going to be in MMA, where he'll finally make a defense of the UFC Lightweight Championship. And actually, Bob Arum ended up firing back, saying the UFC is just desperate for pay-per-view buys. They're a monopoly, and the UFC is a failing business. I'll say this: I don't think the UFC is a failing business, and I don't think it's desperate for pay-per-view buys. But it's just interesting to see that. It's interesting to see that, you know, the pay-per-views, when it comes to the pay-per-views, stuff like the Madison Square Garden, when it comes to the supercard status, to me, that's understandable. But it's just, you know, there's too much supercard. I don't want to say BS, but it's just, there's too much emphasis on the supercard when it comes to pay-per-view. I mean, but that also could be because the UFC holds an event basically every week now. And practically every week. In fact, I think now there's going to be a UFC event every week until the end of the year. Or there's going to be a MMA card until the end of the year, whether it's UFC or Bellator. So it's certainly MMA. It's certainly not MMA being a dying business, and certainly not UFC being a quote. I mean, the UFC technically could be a monopoly. I mean, it is the undisputed biggest promoter in MMA, but you still got Bellator. You still got Ryzen, even though Ryzen's not a big promotion. Bellator, Ryzen is like the TNA as the UFC is to WWE. And you still have the Professional Fighters League. So, you know, there's still options and alternatives out there. So, I don't think the UFC is desperate for pay-per-view buys. It's just the supercard mentality, I think. And also, we do have a big boxing championship matchup coming up this weekend. It's going to be Anthony Joshua defending his heavyweight championships against Carlos Takam. Of course, Carlos Takam was not the original challenger for Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua, of course, won the WBA and IBO heavyweight titles back in April against Vladimir Klitschko. He was already the IBF heavyweight champion. It was one of the biggest upsets in boxing. He knocked out Klitschko, and Klitschko is now retired from the sport, which saddens me a little because I wanted to see a Joshua-Klitschko rematch. But instead, we're going to get him versus Carlos Takam, even though that Takam was not going to be the original challenger. The original challenger was going to be Kubrat Pulev, who was 25-1 with 13 knockouts. Instead, he gets injured and Takam steps up. In my opinion, this is going to be a win for Joshua, but this is just, you know, okay, here's Anthony Joshua showing him off, and now let's see what path we could take for a unification of all the belts. Because, in my mind, whoever wins Deontay Wilder versus Luis Ortiz could end up getting Joshua in a unification bout, and then maybe Joseph Parker, or maybe Joshua faces Parker first to unify his titles and the WBO title. And then add the WBC when the whole WBC situation's cleared out with Wilder and Ortiz. You know, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting scene in the heavyweight division of boxing. And that's going to do it for this edition of Combat Mania. Go like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Periscope at Combat Mania UD. Go follow me on Twitter at Thomas J. Albano. Go follow my other show, The Unspoken Podcast, at the UDUP on Facebook, Twitter, and Periscope. Go like the Undetermined Podcast Network on Facebook at the UD Network and Twitter at MNM Buzz and MNM Breaking. Don't forget to like and follow the rest of the Undetermined Podcast Network accounts, and don't forget to give us a like and subscription here on YouTube and a subscription here on iTunes along with a good rating. And that's going to do it for us. Until next time, I'm Tom Albano, and you've been listening to Combat Mania, Cheap Seat Sports Production, part of the Undetermined Podcast Network. We'll see you next time. Until then, take care, everybody.